everybody, and welcome to the long-awaited and most anticipated episode yet of From Blueprints to Bleachers, the SEC edition, where we will go in-depth in grading the SEC's great stadiums in relation to their own conference, as well as point out a few fun facts about all schools involved. If you're new here, the criteria to be graded on is flashing across the screen. And without further ado, let's get into it with the starter school, when it comes to SEC football at least, in Vanderbilt. With their architecture, Vanderbilt Stadium was built in 1922 and was originally named Dudley Field until 1981, where it was given the general name of Vanderbilt Stadium. Just recently, the school gave out a 10-year naming right contract to First Bank, though, explaining the new name placard that you're seeing here. In the base design, you have a typical horseshoe stadium. They haven't really deviated much from the old school style whatsoever here, with the entrances to the seating being your general landing into bleachered stairs with breaks in between. There's no crazy color coordination, but there are miscellaneous V's placed all throughout. There's no question who they're representing, but there's just not much of a place for anything other than bleachers or football with the minimal updates they've done. The exterior is more of the same, with signs of the times the stadium was built all around you, especially the incredibly thick support columns. It's definitely a throwback destination in the sense they're throwing it back to whenever people cared about Vanderbilt football. But it's not as well kept up nor preservation worthy as something like Rice Stadium here, so they get a D+ here from me. Moving it on to capacity, with the Commodores having an original capacity of 22,000 all the way back in 1922, they have done a decent job in trying to double that number, but it is really hard to believe they haven't even been able to double it, especially being in the SEC, and most of the seating looks like it might be original, funnily enough. But jokes aside, they can count on their hands how many major remodels in regards to seating have taken place, with the most recent one being the addition of indoor and outdoor suites in the north end zone, as well as some general admission seating in 2011. And the time before that would be the expansion of the east side of the stadium, taking them to 34,000 patrons. While they definitely aren't the smallest stadium in the world, when the next best school almost doubles your capacity in your conference, there's got to be improvements made. I'll say the most recent updates are well executed though, so we're going to give them the F. Transitioning on to fan appeal, we have more heartbreak for the Commodore fans as they come in with an F. They are the only SEC school with a sub 88% attendance rating for the past 2 years at all. That is something spectacular to say for the conference as a whole, because we only have one other separate year that's under 90% in the last 2 years for any program other than Vanderbilt. They have 69 and 79%, coming up way short of their competitors in each year. And you have to think it's due to the stadium, as well as the poor performance in general, indifference to football in general. And to close them out with modern amenities, with the relocation and improvement of the Jumbotron in 2011, as well as an improvement to the turf field, I believe Vanderbilt is going great at retrofitting their current stadium situation to the modern day. The issue is going to be when they run into a wall, as retrofitting modern amenities to older designs becomes really hard when you try to maintain a structure's general historical integrity. As we are going to find out in this video, there is a lot of creative ways to go here. And Vanderbilt has taken the way of nothing recently. So we're going to have to go ahead and give them a D+. Rolling on into the next school we're going to be rating is Mississippi State. Architecturally, what was originally called the New Athletic Field until 1920, and then the Scott Field after that until it settled on its current name of the Davis Wade Stadium in 2000. Coming in with a bit of a sleeper rating with a C+ as far as architecture is concerned. Platforms at the corners of the decks and the old school look of the end zone looks heavily appealing to my eye. The walk-up to this stadium is the signature Bulldog, and a high-reaching skyline is the staple to this field, and they surely know it too. It suffers from what a certain percentage of the SEC stadiums do, with a heavy emphasis on wear over the years. With many of the years of SEC tradition comes many years of wear being on a football stadium. The spiral ramps to get to everything within the stadium are very archaic and have not been updated for some time, so that's definitely something that knocks them down a bit here. And a good amount of the lower stadium is cracked and worn asphalt, so Unfortunately, as said before, that is definitely going to affect them. I'll transition us on over to capacity, where if it weren't for their younger brother, that's right, younger brother, Vanderbilt, these cats would be taking home the worst in this category for their capacity, with 61,337 people possible. This was in large part due to the fact of the space available to them at the time, but at the end of the day, it just will not cut it if they're going to be hanging with the big dogs here. Moving on next to fan appeal, where Mississippi State shows us exactly why they're a part of the SEC, and that is the fact that they show out for their games. While they come in 14th in the conference with a combined 91.2% attendance over the last few years, you can't get close to numbers like that in most conferences. So they should be proud at all the same. They clearly have no problem keeping traditions like the late legendary cowbell and the brutally loud rendition of school songs and wild spirit groups that has the game environment like supposedly no other. And you have to mention the premier tailgating experience throughout the campus, but especially the junction. So we're going to be giving them a B here. Last but not least, we have modern amenities. They're going to come in with a B for this category. With the recent balconies addition, I think the Bulldogs administration definitely took a step up here, considering that. It's taking healthy steps in all the right areas, in my opinion, to increase older fan experience without compromising what undergraduates know and love, which is a nice jump into the new age, at least as far as amenities are concerned. I think it also removed less desirable seating to help move them up towards that 100% mark. They're tackling making changes to an older stadium in a very confined step-by-step manner that I believe is working to the best of what they have, which is why it takes so long to decide on what takes next. They updated the video board in 2014, and they have a grass stadium that is well taken care of. And next up is Missouri. We are going to zoom on into Mizzou's architecture. It is hard to break down exactly what separates this school from the rest of the D squad as far as capacity is concerned, but I will do my best because this is a personal favorite of mine. First of all, I'm a sucker for an open field at the end of a horseshoe stadium with a central logo, especially if it's meant for the crowd to freely sit around it, and that's exactly what the Rock M is. I think it absolutely embodies the college mindset of games, and if you're going to have this style of stadium floor plan, this is exactly what it was meant for. Their commitment to the rock and brick themed stadium stayed true throughout its several remodels too, as the addition of several ticket booths and rework of the northern entrance in the 90s heavily accented the brick architecture throughout the existing parts of the stadium. In the 2000s and 2010s, they opted to go vertical with adding suites and more modern fan accommodations, and leave the lower deck alone aside from upkeep, staying true to the original design while expanding on it. Missouri is a prime example of choosing a theme that will stand the test of time too, and catering to it throughout all these years. Man, is that black and yellow captivating. I feel very comfortable giving them a B+ here. Next up is going to be capacity for them. Apart from the D squad here, Missouri comes in 14th overall, having a capacity of 62,621. The seating was originally a single-tier horseshoe, totaling in 25,000, but was renovated several times to get a second tier in the 60s, and then close in the horseshoe and add 10,800 seats in 1978. Their most recent and nicest seating yet came when they joined the SEC, when they added 5,200 general admission and 800 club seats. This definitely did its part in bringing them into the new era, but the lack of general capacity in relation to its peers, with nothing substantial, gets them the D grade here. Zooming on over to fan appeal, Missouri separated themselves from the pack with their architecture, but have fallen to the back of the pack when it comes to attendance, surprisingly, with 91.57% in the last few years. Missouri has what it takes to hang with the conference, but not to top it. That has to do with team performance, in my opinion, but also it could have to do with the fact that they have slowly been getting retrofitted themselves. It has been 10 years since they have claimed a title whatsoever, though, and until 2023, they hadn't won a bowl game in that long as well. If they weren't able to rein it in the win column, I could see this number ticking up, but in the conference where the floor is above 90% attendance, every little bit counts. Next, we have modern amenities. A part of the aforementioned SEC joining improvements was the addition of several elevators, and a few years later, they received a dire upgrade in the form of integrated concessions and a more central indoor bathroom facility in 2014. This brought them from below the floor to at it, in my opinion, and really upped the stadium's game. They upgraded team and away facilities in 2017 and overall have become quite competitive with the competition around them, with special emphasis on their medical and nutrition centers being rated some of the best in the nation. They're looking to add state-of-the-art sound systems as well, though they will look to be limited with their current stadium design like a few of their younger fellow brothers here. Other improvements in this offseason as well, though, are planned too, so we will see exactly what those quote-unquote are. Next up, we are going to have Kentucky, an interesting competitor here in college football as of late. Their architecture, and especially their walk-up to Kroger Field, doesn't exactly intimidate the foes of the mighty Wildcats, but it certainly has to bring back a nostalgic feel to all returning fans with memories here. The valiant UK symbol can be viewed from far and beyond, while the walk-up slowly brings into view the load-bearing beams and the old structure below. It looks like a cross between a parking garage and a high school stadium on the outside. Now on the inside, they do a great job of coordinating the school colors with the seating and the environment, so they kind of cancel out in my opinion. Kentucky comes into this list with a standard bowl stadium that has many of the basic additions of other bowl stadiums made at the end of the 90s, with enclosing the ends of the stadium, thus increasing total suite counts and general admission counts as well, without having to do a whole lot otherwise, but you don't have very much room to go from there in my opinion. They haven't done anything major since the turn of the millennium, despite a good amount of money invested in 2014 to modernize the stadium. They were unable to substantially paint a modern vibe, and I do not expect them to try again, bearing more focus on the program. So we're going to give them a C-. Next is capacity. The Cats come in a part of the D squad as well in the capacity department with only 61,000 active seats in their bowl. They made some general improvements to seating, and we got to give them credit for their blue pull-down seating going down the links to the center field. Big plus and props for that. They have a decent amount of suites for a college bowl program, but I believe they sit at a crossroads of demolishing old to bring in new in different areas of their stadium. It's a common problem of adapting a bowl stadium with suites or an open area. You have yet to decide where you're going. Once you make that decision, you are committed. Next up, we have fan appeal. The big shocker here with Kentucky topping the charts in fan appeal, coming in at number 4 overall in the conference over the last few years. The Wildcats have had some of their better years in the football department and are starting to show signs of life that their school has rallied behind this team. While the stadium might not be to the standards of their competition, this school has a special case in the sense that the football team is doing better than normal, but nothing is insane. And the stadium is nothing to write home about, but they are in the top of the conference in attendance. Their tailgating experience and environment are reported to be very healthy, and the fact that the crowds just keep coming back makes me want to check out the Wildcats for my next football trip. And now to talk about the amenities of this stadium. As a part of the previously mentioned 2014 remodels, this stadium saw a lot of quality of life lighting updates, general amenities and recruiting room remodels, and additions to exterior facades. They controversially switched to Kentucky Bluegrass to turf in 2015, a change that might be going back on pretty soon with the signs of the times, and the video board is a bit outdated. The school definitely puts money into the program when needed, but I personally think they need to take the momentum they have here and run with it a lot more than they already are. Though with football not being the main focus and interest rates on construction being terrible right now, meaning the whole thing would have to be privately funded, I am not sure where we will be seeing that. So we got to give them a C+. Slide on into the Geezer of the Year award. We have Ole Miss with their Vaught Hemingway Stadium, which was originally built in 1915. It took 3 years to finish, actually. It's gone through 5 major renovations since then and 6 expansions, making it what it is today. Architecturally, the added shade screens recently add a flair of luxury to the more premium red pull-down seating below that shares the color of the seating on the higher landing above. The walk-up entrance is daunting and has callbacks to the time the stadium was built with decent modern accents to tie it in. I'm going to give this stadium a solid C+, as they got creative with the modern retrofitting along the way and did their due diligence. And as a part of the Mississippi-Kentucky D squad, Ole Miss earns themselves a plus at the end of that D with 64,038 seats for people to put their butts in at their place. There's not much to say here. The newer additions to the stadium have updated seating, and the older areas have not been touched whatsoever. There's definitely a separation of old and new, and they're in a conference where the top 5 stadium capacities are in the 6 figures, so, just got to step it up. Next up being fan appeal, Ole Miss comes in at fifth place in the conference as far as fan attendance goes, with 98.59% fan turnout, earning them an A. They sure do know how to keep the gang around the Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, earning them this ranking especially. This is a testament to the fact that more seats are needed, as there is clearly a demand for them. While there's something to say for selling out, mobility in the stadium is valued as well, and these guys pack the house, showing exactly what Ole Miss is all about here. With the Ole Miss and modern amenities, they call back to their roots, going back to grass in 2016. This was a great and welcome change, and an upgrade at the Northern Video Board is still the most prominent amenity change within the last decade that I can find. This stadium is more of a homey tradition-y feel than is a modern marvel by any means, and most of their additions are out of necessity. It's working for them, and there is no reason to change it anytime soon, but for that reason, this category gets a D+. If you are like me and didn't know why the Razorbacks have two home stadiums, it's actually because they are sticking true to their tradition and possibly appealing to older boosters that grew up in that era. Back in the days where Fayetteville was a next-to-nothing college town, the War Memorial Stadium was a way for patrons to get their gazers on the Razors and for the Razors to get their abilities on the gazers of the patrons. Fayetteville has become quite the town. We have seen them deviate more towards their home city. So I ended up doing their Fayetteville home for this one, but we're definitely going to have to look into this at a later date. Jumping into architecture, we have a nicely remodeled end zone area blended into the skeleton of the original stadium in a way that complements their theme perfectly. I absolutely love this, but the one drawback to retrofitting is the fact that you have conflicting ideas of how a stadium is to be walked around when layered around on each other. Some remodels get it right, and others don't. And from most reports I'm reading, the pathways are 50-50 as far as getting somewhere efficiently and effectively due to the floor plans. And the general confusing layout of the place just really puts people off. And general paths being constricted in bottleneck areas doesn't do it any favors. The snazzy yet slightly archaic entrance wraps puts a bow on the outside of this sandwich, making this stadium beautiful from the entrance and on the actual product of the field, but the pathways to get there are quite constricted. I have a feeling they'll find their way, and I definitely need to visit this stadium too. We're going to give it a B+. At 76,000 seats, the capacity of the Razorbacks fan stadiums are a bit closer to seeing a six-figure number here, but they will need to fill their decks and go full bowl mode at this point if they want to reach it. The end zone remodel they got recently has served them well, and in my opinion fits right in. Special credit to them putting the pull-down seating in an appealing way. It almost looks like A's from afar. I know it doesn't look like that, but I'm not sure. It just looks really nice to me. We are going to have to give them a D+ here, though. For fan appeal, at B+, the Razorbacks did pretty well for themselves with their 93.37% attendance. Their fans of old are resilient, and the new fans are learning the ropes quite nicely. The energy at these games can be seen and felt through the TV. And personally, this is a bucket list destination for me. I'd say they didn't get a ranked opponent not named Missouri in the last 2 years, and that might have contributed to them not being even higher on this list, but everybody gets a drop on the same deck, and some of these guys get sold out against FCS teams with their home crowds, so nobody can complain here. Next is modern amenities. The recent change to grass here for the Razorbacks in 2019 is an absolute plus for me. And most people these days would agree. They definitely set themselves above the lower spectrum of the conference with the new video board, and you can see 5-star reports from all reviews of the concessions. The bathrooms seem close by, and sound radiates this within the stadium quite effectively. This is going to earn them a B-. They have all of the creature comforts that you would come to expect from a stadium. So we're going to move on here. The next school we have here is Oklahoma. Starting off the ratings with the boomer for the Sooners with an A. We have the beautiful Gaylord family Oklahoma Memorial that really sets the architectural bar high. While the eventual plan is from a bird's eye view, there's no question what stadium you're flying over with the bottom deck forming the O and the upper deck blatantly forming a U. It currently gets the job done for what has been currently built. This paired with these certain sections of the student section being painted white or red depending on the area are two major factors in what give this stadium its personality. The different amenities in Glassy Fieldhouse do a great job in covering up the structure of the building from fans walking up, and they also have some of the school's incredible callbacks to the days past. Next up is capacity with a C-, working their way up from an original total of 500 patrons on a temporary bleacher stadium that was dirt. They had arrived at a total of 80,126 patrons for maximum capacity as of 2023. The Sooners Nation comes in at the lower middle of the pack at 10th in the SEC, though, and the fact they lost almost 6,000 total seats in 2019 does not help with that. It definitely was for the better, as most of those seats did not meet the 18 inches wide building code, thus opening up the stadium and making it feel a lot more fluid and engaging according to most people during the game and exiting. Overall, the greatest contribution for this category could be the moving of the road east of the stadium, as this allowed for the upper deck that we all know and love, and addition of suites, which greatly helped the quality of life of the stadium. Next up was a surprise to me, but might not be a surprise to you Sooners fans, with an A+ rating here for the Sooners for fan appeal, topping the charts in an insane way. They're not even in yet, but we see this going very well, and for the theme of the SEC, especially for the Sooners, with a whopping 104% capacity over the course of the last 2 seasons. The sheer limited amount of seats in a storied program as the Sooner Stadium might be a factor here, but there's plenty of other schools here that we're discussing that have not achieved such a feat, so that ends the argument right there. The many different historic gathering places paired with a lot of fun game day chants like Boomer Sooner that really gets the crowd into it, all coupled with the fact that there's not much competition in Oklahoma, makes this place the perfect storm for gaining an attendance edge. Last for these guys is going to be modern amenities. The all-in-one facility really lets you get a great look at what Oklahoma sports is really about when you're walking around the perimeter. And when you pull up to the stadium, you're quickly greeted by open areas to access the stadium, as well as the lovely history while walking in and out. The stadium food is exactly what I'm looking for in stadium food, which is a perfect blend of ridiculous concepts with well-executed processes and plenty of space to get in and out of those areas. B comes to mind when I think of it all together, so we're going to roll with that. Next is going to be the Florida Gators. We're going to jump into their architecture, and something I want to touch on immediately is how this stadium was able to integrate orange so perfectly into the stadium view. This stadium is a bowl stadium done right, and with the angled top deck, makes certain you really hear a difference in noise level when you go to Gainesville. The spiral walk-ups to the stadium decks are iconic, and the swamp looks incredible from the bird's eye view. I'd say the look of layered decks on the end zones while having the edges be continuous gives the stadium a controlled wall of sound look when they're able to pack the house, kind of keeping it old school. We're going to give this bad boy an A. Next on is going to be their capacity. At 88,548 seats, they're just ahead of Auburn, but not ahead enough to get their own grading letter like Georgia. The team currently has used most of the space they have, with their only options being to heighten the decks even more, or to build up the backside on the other 3 sides of their stadium, like what the press box is doing, and form a modern open area tied into suites. Either way, they're middle of the pack here, earning them a B. Next on to fan appeal, we have coming in with an A. The Gators are suffering from a bit of an extended rebuild after the Urban Meyer era, but that really hasn't shown, as their attendance is at 4th in the conference with 99.73%. Surely when the record's even better, the stadium would fall apart with the amount of people shoved into the stadium? Well, it hasn't yet, so keep your fingers crossed that it never does. The fans clearly enjoy their stadium and have an incredibly intense atmosphere. You can see it on video, and if you ask anybody, they say it's some of the best football they've ever gone to see. This is a very earned A rating in a down performance year, and the consistency with this crowd cannot be understated for this team. Next up, we have the modern amenities, with normal amenities being taken care of very well here. There's nothing crazy to write home about. I'm left with giving this stadium a B-. They have excellent quality screens at both ends, and the food is an exceptional highlight of the local area and chains. So it's hard to knock them, but at the end of the day, it's hard to give them a whole lot of brownie points. Speaking of brownie points, we are going to Kyle Field, home of the Texas A&M Aggies here. Architecturally, they went through a gigantic overhaul of this stadium, occurring nearly a decade ago now. It seems like yesterday. It's safe to say that while the nostalgia of the old stadium exterior will be missed, they integrated the historical side of the field very well with the newly constructed exterior. The name of this field is plastered right in the middle of it for all to see, and it can be seen from every angle of Harvey Mitchell Parkway and other surrounding minor streets, as well as the school area behind it. The structure itself is just massive and was built straight off the ground, so the general size just feels massive, and the stadium is felt throughout the city as far as a skyline piece, a drive-by piece, and just as a part of the community. The integration with the campus while also building a seemingly completely new stadium while keeping the history intact really does it for me. We're going to have to give this one an A+. They did an excellent job here in regards to a college stadium. Next on, we're going to have capacity. They're coming in with an A+. Famously, Colts have needed themselves a sizable gathering area, and Kyle Field does this just right. Topping out the list in an overall magnitude of capacity is the Aggies Nation with 102,733 available seats. They get the A+ in this realm as they have the high-quality suites open and closed throughout the stadium, and a blend in between for all of you wanting premium options but not wanting to go full premium. The ratio of pulled-in stadium seating to bleachers is the best in the conference by a small margin, but it is a margin in my opinion. So we absolutely believe they deserve the A+ here as well, just due to sheer magnitude. Next up is where people might get a little mad at me, but the numbers do not lie, folks. And it's them coming in with a B- for fan appeal. And it really goes on to you Aggies. The sheer fact that I've lived in College Station for a bit, and they literally shut the main road down to the city for every single game, and they shut the main road to the city down for every single game. It was absolutely gobsmacking for me to find out that they're in 15th place on this list with an average attendance of 90.88%. The whole city should be there because you can't be anywhere else. I was absolutely shocked. The amount of impossible it is to do anything else before and after the game, unless you're going to the game, is just, it's astronomically impossible. The whole population of the city was raised to have their dreams to be attending that school too. You really expect a higher turnout, but it is hard to fill out that many seats. Closing out modern amenities, we have them getting an A+ here. You gotta give it to them, you gotta hand it to them. This stadium is crafted by some absolute well-qualified individuals. We mentioned the remodel to Kyle Stadium earlier, and they clearly put a lot into the many different polished amenities. From thought put into dining areas for families or to museum-centric areas for all game goers to look at. This stadium has it all. The sound system is booming, and you can literally hear it from further than half a mile away. The Hall of Champions is a lovely destination for any level of Aggie fan, and the whole building is a Wi-Fi accessible beast. The video system is coordinated well with the lights too, especially for night games, and it really just makes for an experience like no other. You really just got to check it out. These big Texas stadiums are really embodied nicely by Texas A&M, especially if you're going for the college level field. Speaking of stadiums built right out of the ground seeming humongous, we have UT Stadium up next here with the Darrell K. Royal Stadium. These guys are built out of the ground here as well. They are just massive. UT's is a bit more of your traditional expected stadium with the retrofitting though here. They have a giant video board that streams one side of their elevation of the stadium behind the seating in the form of a longhorn coming out for the run out for the students though. That's just insane. You gotta love it. The Texas flair is there. You gotta give them credit for it. These guys absolutely show out. The color scheme is there. It's something I grew up watching, so it's gonna be a bit biased, but I'm gonna be giving these guys the A here. The architecture is just a lovely, classic NCAA football stadium for me, and the lights above the top deck shining in is just what I remember. Next up is going to be capacity. The University of Texas is going to come in with an A for this category, with their overall capacity being a whopping 100,119 people. That is fourth in their conference as far as capacity. Well, they're not really in the conference yet, but you know exactly what I'm saying. If they were to be in the conference, that's what they would be. They lose points for now for what will be a greater payoff later, as for right now they're under heavy construction that is planned to finish in 2026. That will have them right up there with the best SEC stadiums, as they're trying to make a statement with the transfer. A lot of the new updates to the seating at least look like the Tennessee Stadium, especially with the southern end zone seating. Their suites are in traditional viewing areas and have a nice UT flair to them, and their overall ratio of pull-down seating is a pretty good one and only getting better. I can only see them trying to compete with A&M, especially getting into the same conference with them in a while, so it'd be really crazy to see what happens here. Again, A here, moving on to fan appeal. And for fan appeal, we are going to be giving the Longhorns an A-. They just dropped out of the A tier with the 97.03% attendance rating from their student body. In the past few years, they've come in the top half of the list. They have certainly gotten an uptick in fan presence with the return of the glory days seemingly ahead of them, with an answer at quarterback and a Manning to back him up to boot. The crazy thing is that 2023 was worse than 2022, so they're going to have to keep the fleeting interest of Gen Z if they have any hopes of retaining this grading once they actually join the SEC, which I find no problem in, but you never know. Next up is gonna be the modern amenities of Longhorn Stadium. This is gonna be where the UT Longhorns fall short a little bit. I would say their amenities are, again, well, not exactly short. See, they are a little just concurrent with everybody else here. I don't see anything crazy, and they haven't made any major insane updates. When I'm relating them to their peers, I believe they have a B here. There's just not much else to say. Sliding on into LSU here, we have the classic preserve of the lower bowl here, where we have a lot of beautiful nostalgia, and having the upper decks in the form of a horseshoe at the top. And it's era of their times for the expansion here. You have the walk-up being spiral staircases on certain ends, and it blends in very well with the Coliseum look of the lower bowl of LSU. And the Coliseum look of the lower bowl actually blends in very well with the integration into the campus. So when you look at this thing on campus, it is a very attractive site, and it only attracts more at night. The classic look doesn't really take away here, so I really would have to give this an A-, I would say, as it is a bit of a classic look, and I believe when you put it against a few of its competitors here, it loses out, but it is an absolutely beautiful stadium to see, and the color coordination is absolutely divine here. Moving on to capacity for the LSU Tigers, we have them coming in at third. They absolutely dominate in this echelon of the category. They're going to get the A+ here with A&M and one of their other schools on this list. I mean, what can I say here? They have absolutely utilized what space they have. That lower bowl has to be compact, because I don't feel as if the upper bowls highlight that they have that much capacity to get this lower bowl and upper bowl equaling 100,000 people. So there has got to be some space situations grandfathered in down there, because it does not look like it. But being able to achieve it with this look as well with the skyline, it is an absolute treat, and they are very well deserving of this A+. Next up is going to be the fan appeal rankings for the Tigers, and they do well on this side of things too. They are on the top half of the list, and not just on the knife's edge either. They're coming at number 7 with 98.43%. We're going to give them an A here. The LSU Tigers fans have always been passionate from what I've known growing up with them, and at the end of the day, we don't have anything crazy going on here, and they are almost completely selling out. And you got to give them credit. I mean, they are legendarily a passionate fan base, and it has always shown. And the SEC is definitely the place for them here. As far as modern amenities are concerned, LSU is going to come in with a B-. They have all the creature comforts that you could expect from a major SEC stadium, albeit they are starting to lack when compared to a lot of these guys that are adding these wider walkways and crazier concession areas and callbacks and things like that. LSU has stayed with the times, so we're going to just go ahead and give them that B-. Moving on over to the Georgia Bulldogs, Sanford Stadium. We have a bit of an interesting integration into the city where this stadium looks like it has just sunken into the landscape and grown in with the features of the city. It absolutely doesn't say look at me, it says look at us, and I absolutely love it. The end zone seats opposing the main screen absolutely look like they're not even there when you are behind them, and that is the look it has throughout. Even though the exterior does look a bit archaic, it absolutely has blended in with the additions to the stadium that they've added on the outside, so you can't really knock it there. I'd like to give this one an A- because personally this just really appeals to the eye from any angle, not just one, and the Georgia Bulldogs do an absolute beautiful job of laying it out nicely as far as colors are concerned, and I know a little bit too much about too much red. Next up is going to be their capacity, with the maximum seats at Sanford Stadium being 92,746. They end up separating themselves a smaller tier above the rest of the schools whose stadiums don't reach six figures, earning them a well-deserved B+ just on magnitude alone. The seats themselves aren't anything crazy to write home about. They have made certain updates to them, and they definitely have some suites. The suites definitely stand out to the eye and could use an update. So we're going to be giving them a B+ and moving on. Next up for them is going to be fan appeal, an A+ in this category as well. You cannot knock Georgia fans at all. They have gotten a perfect 100% 2 years in a row, and I believe it would have a little bit of something to do with old and young alike, so we shall see how this plays out, especially with a lot of the more recent Georgia fans that have been made with their recent success. We ought to see what comes of it as far as school population and undergraduate population too in the future. Next up is going to be the modern amenities of the Bulldogs. Most recently, the Bulldogs upgraded to an all LED state-of-the-art light system and also added a bit of an HD capability to the video board. Other than that, nothing crazy has been added. It's mostly been quality of life and capacity situations. So we can't really give them a whole lot here. We're definitely going to be giving them the C because they haven't done anything that hurts their program or anything like that. But they haven't really seen any reason to upgrade, so they haven't. Next up is going to be an absolute beautiful blend of tradition and modern design with the Bryant-Denny Stadium of the Alabama Rolling Tide. This stadium is an absolute beast and has been one of my favorite stadiums to get to know here during this series. It is a lot more beautiful than I thought, I will admit, and the upper deck style of doing things is definitely something. And as you know and have heard before, the upper deck shades are something that I can absolutely put some respect on. They do it right and do it absolutely. And they do it absolutely perfectly here. The colors of red are my favorite, and the color scheme of the stadium rhymes in perfectly. The lettering on the end zones ties in well with exactly the blood red that you're going to see during Stadium Day, and they knew that they were going to pack the house when they made this stadium. Boy, did they. The walk up to the stadium is absolutely beautiful. It's integrated a little bit into the campus as well. The walk up for this stadium has been worked on recently and is even nicer. They have a little bit of a Hall of Champions of their own here, as well as a callback to their very storied tenures that they have had here in the college football landscape, and that is a beautiful thing to visit for anybody as well. They also have had a lot of very major renovations of their own, with movings of lodge boxes, sky boxes, all kinds of different things for different premium seats, club areas, and things like that. A lot of their recruiting areas have been improved, and a lot of the traffic flow throughout the stadium itself has been improved recently as well, just making it a lot more of a modern stadium while keeping their high amount of capacity. That one seats. We're going to have to talk about capacity, with the great Rolling Tide receiving an A in this one as well. They are unable to dominate this category, unfortunately. They come in a few thousand seats short to do that. If they fully fill in the edges of their stadium and make it a true bowl, they could get those seats back, and it might be in the cards with all the other different remodels they've done to this stadium. You never know. But with 101,821 patrons, the Rolling Tide are in the top quarter of this list with the 4th place designation. Next up, we have the fan appeal. Ending up on the lower half of this list, just barely, we have the Tide at 9th in the conference, totaling 96.18% across the last 2 years. The Tide have had a lot more negatives in a row than what they are used to, with the Nick Saban era ending and not winning a championship on the way out to boot. This is clearly being reflected in their numbers, and while they're not failing as a program, when the bar is set high for success, you're going to lose some attendance from the fair-weather fans you've gathered during the rough years. While I'm sure that the storied fans will come into cover, this has definitely been an interesting last 2 years as far as fan total percentage. Moving on to modern amenities, we are going to definitely have to highlight the big construction remodel in 2020 for the Bryant-Denny Stadium here again. They got state-of-the-art facilities for their teams here and absolutely brought themselves to the higher levels of any stadium amenity situation. The locker room, the weight room, the general staffing rooms for everybody that's going in and out for the NCAA workings and things and so forth, absolutely benefited greatly from this remodel. And it was definitely something I can feel comfortable giving a B+ to. Getting more towards the end of this list now, we have Auburn here. We are going to be grading their architecture. Almost immediately, I have to bring up the entrance to the field at Auburn Stadium. It has an old school big logo entrance feel, but has several podium landings that cover the structure of the original Stadium Bowl while they went up with construction. And it ended up turning into offices and things alike. On the other side of the stadium, you have them embracing the big steel look with some faux supports throughout the elevation to mix in with the real supports so you can actually never tell. It absolutely looks like an excellent style choice. The pavers leading up to the stadium are all color coordinated in a way that makes it pop. Same with the subtle accents in between the seating. It's an overall very well integrated stadium to the campus, and the accessories to the stadium like the press box and field houses add in nicely without sticking out. They have yet to close in the bowl on the sides, but I think that it would be best to find a way around actually doing that, weirdly enough, as the corners they have are so refined, and it's something I don't commonly see. We're going to be giving them an A here. Moving on to capacity, which they are going to be a little bit more underwhelmed with this placing here. It's an 8th overall placing with 87,451 maximum patrons allowed. We have Auburn in more towards the top half of the league here still, but they haven't broken through that upper threshold of 6-figure seating. They do have some state-of-the-art field level suites for the more premium upgrade options, which is ahead of the game for most schools actually. And these seats are sure to snag more revenue to in turn get more seating like this if this ends up being the rage. Hope it's not just a fad because these are a big investment though. The C+ is well deserved, and we will see where they go with their seating diagram. On to fan appeal. We have the War Eagles doing an excellent job in showcasing their consistency as a fan base here with a 6th place overall finish in fan appeal at 98.6%. Even in times of uncertainty of a program, Auburn has always been able to keep its fan entranced with a combination of a well-sold sports package to the students and doing their due diligence to keep their fans involved in the off-season process as well. It's not an unforeseen concept, but it's one that they execute to an absolute perfection. The quality and cleanliness of the stadium helps in this category as well, earning them their A rating here too. Next up for the Jordan-Hare Stadium is going to be their modern amenities. And they're home to the biggest Jumbotron screen in college football currently. And this is just one of the examples of the incredible amount of investing that goes into this program and stadium. They recently renovated the stadium for more ideal Wi-Fi connectivity and did some quality of life changes to the team field entrances as well. The new concession spaces are made with the use of space in mind, and they are accented just right. We have to give them a top rank in this category with an A because they are absolutely leading the field and setting the tone for the rest of their peers in this conference. Next up, we are going to have Tennessee. The choice to do two main decks wrapped around the stadium completely is a nice classic look that I always enjoyed looking at playing in the NCAA games back in the day. The Volunteers have an iconic looking location of this building and have finally started to put the renovating work into the exterior to boot. The entrance makes you feel like you're walking up to a museum in a way, which is good and bad, and it absolutely has a nice glassy appearance. I'm going to give it a B+ here. It's a good classic look, but it doesn't hit my eyes in the same way that some of these others have. Next up, we're going to have capacity for the Volunteers. They barely missed out on the glory here, going in with 102,455 seats for people to put their butts in. They're going to be second in the conference. They barely miss out on the top spot, but they are certainly open and ready for the audience. And good thing too, as their program has been churning out talented squads over the past few years now. The seat quality is barely better than what it was when installed at inception though, with bleachers far and wide, reminding me of UTEP Stadium, so I looked them down to an A-. Next up, we're going to have fan appeal. Landing in this next category, the Vols get a B with a 91.65 attendance over the course of 2 years. This is impressive for what until recently was one of the smaller players of the SEC in the 2000s era of college football as far as success. The uptick in performance has helped, but you don't average close to six-figure attendance without doing something right. The old Rocky Top has seen very few renovations, and while it got one last year, the interior next year could definitely use a bit of direction here. And rounding it out, we have modern amenities, and while location is not commonly thought of as an amenity, and we haven't really been doing that, it's gonna have to count for Tennessee here, as they are right in the middle of everything you could want city-wise, and the views of the nearby river are immaculate. Inside of the stadium, you'll find wide corridors and spaced out areas for amenities and merchandise without encroaching on the walkway. They definitely understood that 100,000 seats means 100,000 people inside at one point. One thing I can say is there is not a whole lot of modern ideas about it, but that is certainly one. And with that combined with the location and the general fact that they have the incorporation of normal creature comforts, they are going to get an A for this category, rounding out the Tennessee Volunteers here. And last but not least, these were done in, like I said, no general order. We're going to have the South Carolina Gamecocks. Architecturally, the Gamecocks are going to finish out this list of, as I said, no particular order. Kicking off our architecture talk, I'd like to point out the unique feature of the extending light poles from the top of the stands and being angled back to the field, being not only a very creative way to light the stadium, but also keep crowd noise in as well, to a very minimal extent, of course. It also makes it, in my opinion, a very nice accent piece to the red throughout the sky and frontal walk-up views of the property. Speaking of walk-up, the entrance to this beautiful stadium does the interior justice, as it shows you exactly what you're in store for, from the tailgating train cars to the modernized centerpiece in the field house, complemented by the old-school spiral concourses on either side as well. The colorization of the individual pull-down seating is a big bonus for me, as it isn't in traditional rows, making it seem even fuller when the house isn't packed. All this leads to the Gamecocks coming out of this category with an A-. Well done. Next up is going to be South Carolina, coming into the lower middle of the pack at 9th place in the conference, at 80,520 possible seats in their stadium. These seats are mostly updated though, as I will say they get bonus points for that, as the variety of seating for all ages is there for the taking, and it is an absolute pleasure to see that they're looking ahead here. Next up is going to be their fan appeal, ranking it at 10th with a lovely 95.37%. We have the Gamecocks getting a B+ for this category. Just like the rest of their peers, the bar is heightened being a part of the SEC, especially with the fan attendance. There isn't a whole lot of people in general in South Carolina, so we might be asking for a high percentage of the active population in the state. I'm not quite sure. I'm not privy to that information of their population. But in order to hang with the rest of the crowd, it's necessary. That's all I'm saying. The team has never been entirely flashy, so this stat will fluctuate with the win statistic going up, as we have seen it do in the past. Higher than 95 attendance sure is good enough to sway the upper deck though, so I can't see anything wrong here. And next, closing out the last category of the last school of this video is gonna be the modern amenities. South Carolina Gamecocks went through some quality of life changes like stadium lights and club area renovations recently, and have polished off this lovely stadium very nicely. They have the bare necessities very well taken care of, and this recent change makes me feel like they have an idea of where they want to go with the stadium. They're just not sure where to start, and they're filling in the pieces right now. South Carolina surely has spoiled this stadium with it being the centerpiece of South Carolina football right now. So it is really cool to see what they do integrate in at this level. Ending this category off with a B. And that's going to do it, folks. I know we went over a lot today. That is for sure. I very quickly went through the rankings at the end and kind of threw them in there for a reason. At the end of the day, I wanted the breakdown and review to be the staple point of this video. I wasn't trying to pit stadiums against each other. At the end of the day, it's all about the love for the architecture and the cool different features and fun facts about the stadiums. But we all do love a good ranking list here at the Pick Six, so I do have my overall rankings. I broke the tie based on opinion, though, if they did tie as far as total value in both of those situations. The SEC is one of the most storied conferences in college football and definitely most successful as of late, too. The delicate history of every fan and attendee is kept inside the walls of these stadiums, and it's clear the staff making the decisions does not take this responsibility lightly in these conferences. Due to this, changes happen slowly, and one renovation will have little to none of the team in charge of the previous renovation with the current team in charge of the new renovation. Yet they're stuck with working with the structure that was made by several different teams of their past. Schools like A&M demolished part of the old that they couldn't work with and came in with new, different ideas, and they were able to bridge different gaps, while other schools like South Carolina add on in phases and retrofit accordingly. Others fall somewhere in between on that spectrum, and I'd be happy to go into detail if you all are interested. It was an absolute pleasure to delve into and give my service opinion on each of these categories, as well as discuss some of the facts. Let me know what stadium is your favorite, and why you think the Arkansas Red is different than the other team's red, or is that just me? Until next time, have a good day and have a nice life, y'all.